I think the benefit of being in the group is support and honesty and the drive to push each other to exceed something, to not be afraid to try new things. Like when you're alone in the studio, it's kind of like, should I do that? I don't know. It's kind of out of my comfort zone, blah, blah, blah. But if you're with friends who respect you, support you, and admire what you do, whether or not they say it in their feedback, you can kind of really push the boundaries and leave that comfort zone that you're used to.
We are back again on the Pencil Kings podcast. I am your host, Mitch Bowler from pencilkings.com, and today we're talking to Cyrus Smith. Cyrus and I actually went to the same art school. If you've been listening for a while, you know my opinion of art school and how it's maybe not the best fit. But I think Cyrus is unique because he's one of the very few people that went through art school and is still continuing to work and practice as a traditional fine artist.
Pencil Kings.
So welcome to the call, Cyrus. How are you doing today?
Very well, thank you.
And you're from Winnipeg, but you're in a unique location.
At the moment, I'm living in Berlin, Germany.
What's the 2-minute introduction about yourself and what you do? And then we'll get into your story of how you started.
I am a visual artist. I tend to work with a bunch of different material all at the same time. I kind of have an ADD studio practice. And I'm from the sunny prairie town of Winnipeg, Manitoba, and generally pretty easygoing person.
So in the beginning, did you know that you wanted to be an artist when you were a kid? When did that bug bite you?
I didn't know this for many years until I was a teenager, but my mother told me once when I was literally 3 or 4 years old. I was in the kitchen with her one evening, and I think I was doing some kind of art, some sort of drawing with markers or something. And I looked up at her and with a total deadpan face, according to her. And I said, "Mom, when I grow up, I'm going to be an artist." I just straight up told her that. And I obviously don't remember. But that sort of instigated my parents into nurturing that idea. So they were always Christmas and birthdays buying me paints and things like that. And my brothers, although they were really bored, I was totally interested to visit studios and Winnipeg Art Gallery and various other smaller artist-run galleries to see work. And I mean, it still kind of was something that was more of a pastime. It wasn't really a driving force in my life when I was younger, but I would always be making stuff, painting things and drawing and thinking about it, and envious of my friends. I had this one friend in grade 6 who could just draw anything he wanted from his head, and it was this perfect rendering. It was just killing me that I couldn't do that, and I wanted so hard to get to his level. But I mean, I think he was just a savant in that regard. During high school, I kind of started experimenting with street art, or the less legal form of graffiti. And I guess it satiated a little bit of that creative bug, because I sort of stopped producing things for a while in that kind of teenager party mode, trying to experience other parts of life and neglecting the creative side of me. But when I got into graffiti, it sort of reignited that passion that I had.
And so would you say that art was it in your family before, or was it just that moment when you were 3 or 4 years old and you told your mom you wanted to be an artist that set you on that path?
Well, I guess people in my family have been creative. I mean, my grandfather on my dad's side, he's a woodworker, and he builds these wooden sculptures. In my immediate family, it was always encouraged as a pastime, because my parents were kind of more hippies. They wanted us to kind of use our brains a bit. So that was sort of one of the things that we could do that was utilizing the brain, I guess.
Gotcha. For me, I spent a lot of time with my grandparents, and my grandma was a really good artist. And she had this picture of a tree that, I guess, like your friend in grade 6 who could render perfectly. To me, this tree that she had drawn in pencil was rendered perfectly. I was like, one day, I'll be able to draw as good as grandma. It was just that one picture, it's still emblazoned in my mind. I could probably, whip out a pencil and a piece of paper and draw it today. in art school, I think we had one class together, a video class, but you were, well, I'll say like an art star, or that somebody that people saw with, an exceptional talent or a unique talent, even though you're in this faculty of, I think it was maybe 400 quote unquote artists. How was university for you? How did you enjoy that process? Did you enjoy it? And yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, thanks for the compliment. It had been a number of years since I finished high school before I went to university. I think I was living in Victoria at the time when I was contemplating going back to school for art, but I was actually considering going into photography for some reason, because when I was living on the West Coast, I think this was in 97 or 98, I was doing a lot of photography and just really digging it. But I mean, not really in any artistic sense, just shooting things that I liked to see that caught my eye, I guess. All the while still dabbling with graffiti, because I think that sort of became an ingrained part of my life at the time. And I guess, especially in my first year of school, there were a lot of things that were so new that I was being exposed to, not just like the vast history of the art world, which, I mean, granted, my father had given me a little insight into it, but not to that extent where it's just crammed down your throat, like 30,000 years of art history in in 8 months, not to mention the access to all the different media and tools, sculpture, painting, drawing, video, you name it. It was just all this orgy of creativity. And I think for me at that time, it was just this perfect environment where I could really explore without inhibition whatever I wanted, right? As we all could. But I think the time that I had away from high school, I think it was almost like 5 years or 5 or 6 years, really allowed me to center myself. And I kind of lost that whole mentality of like, oh, school and work and home. Oh, we have homework. I remember being in a few classes in first year and getting homework, and the homework was to do a painting, and there were a few students in the class that were complaining, saying, we have to go home and do a painting. And I just said, oh, yeah, it's great. Isn't it great? Like, I can't, it starts like, it's the best homework I've ever had. But I think overall the experience of school was really, really beneficial to me because, like I said, I'd kind of always been doing something, making something. And what school allowed me to do was really better understand myself as an artist, or whatever practice I had, and how to kind of expand on that. And I was able to sort of, by exploring so much, kind of edit and discover what I really want to make or what I really don't want to make. And it was very insightful. I know some people can also say you don't need to go to school, but it's different for everyone. I think for me, it was important to be able to gain a better understanding of like who I am in a creative manner, and I guess what I have the ability to do.
Do you think that if you had gone straight out of high school to university, that it would have been such a good experience for you?
Probably not. I don't think my head would have been in the right place. I think I had to kind of exercise some demons, as it were, with that time away. I think if I went directly into university from high school, it might have been I was one of those complaining kids, or I might have resented being there. Personally, when I finished grade 12 for the second time, I really did not want to be in school. Look, there was all the guidance counselor advice to, hash out your university plan and blah, blah, blah. The last thing I wanted to do was do that.
Anyone that I've talked to that's gone back to school or has waited a bit to go to school, it seems like the experience is completely different, because instead of it being something that it's sort of forced on you, like guidance counselors and parents and expectations of just like, you finished high school, so now what's the next step? Go to university. It's like, no, figure out who you are. Once you know that, maybe university is the right place, maybe it's not, but at least then you're choosing for yourself instead of just kind of following the script.
Exactly. Even just a bit of travel. Like I was lucky enough to not stay in Winnipeg, which there's nothing wrong with staying where you are and taking some time away, but it was kind of good to get a little perspective on myself and to travel a bit. It's so cliche, but I did, in a sense, find myself, or at least the self that I was then, because we all change all the time.
Thought it was a fair gamble. Either I'd find myself or get it out of my system.
How did you go into being, a fine artist? Because to me, it's just fascinating. I knew I would be a commercial artist and doing things, somebody would tell me what they wanted to do and that would be that. But I don't think I ever had the stones, personally to say I would want to be a fine artist. And so I'm really curious about, from your perspective, how it worked for you.
What happened to me in university is I developed this insatiable drive and motivation in the studio, and my practice is just like to be working, always making something, just anything, something. Almost that it makes you sick, that it's just like, I have to do something, I don't care what it is, I got to take these 2 pieces of paper, I'm cleaning the studio, but I can still make work. But not in a way that it's, semi-psychotic or anything, but it's just this satisfaction or gratification that I give myself when I can complete something that makes me happy. So through that, I guess I started to take the advice of maybe some of the professors, or like, okay, why don't I go to some art shows and meet some people and just try to, I guess I kind of approached the whole thing very carefree, and like I didn't have any inhibition meeting these big, huge, famous artists. Even in little old Winnipeg, we get some of those artists coming through, and I just treated them like any other person. And I kind of was taking the step forward and doing other silly things, like making a huge body of work and just giving it away at openings. Or like I did one thing where when I started to meet some of the other artists in the Winnipeg art world, I made a series of work where I copied their work, not directly, but I did a work in their fashion. And then at their next opening, I would give them the work and we took pictures, but I would dress up in an art star costume. And I guess inadvertently, without trying, I was making a name for myself, I suppose. I guess I'm also one of the least motivated in terms of applying for shows. Like I'm a bad artist in that way. That's part of your job as an artist. It's not just studio work. Like if you want to show a lot, it's probably a good idea to apply to galleries, apply to residencies, apply for grants, blah, blah, blah. Tedious office work that no one ever wants to do. It's necessary. And I mean, I've always been really horrible at doing that. So I guess I was lucky enough to be offered to be parts of groups of exhibitions while I was still in school. And some of the galleries were kind of against showing students work, but I managed to slip through the cracks there. And from that, I guess I just also got a real kick out of getting feedback from people looking at your stuff. I just accepted that was my reality and still is, despite the ups and downs or series of events that happen throughout anyone's life that can make you question kind of, is this really what I should be doing? But I've never really given it a second thought.
It always seemed like you were having a ton of fun. Like no matter what you were doing, like you were in exactly the right place, and you were just and it didn't matter where I saw you. You were just like had this giant smile on your face. Like there was like the clouds had parted a little bit, and there was just this glow about you. And so I imagine that was infectious and definitely helped out when you're starting to pursue these opportunities in galleries.
It is fun. I think as soon as it becomes really serious, you have to take a step back. I mean, for me anyway, like if I can't enjoy what I'm doing, then I guess I have to reconsider what I'm doing. Yeah, it's definitely fun. People gravitate towards that. Like, don't you want to be near the happiest person in the room as opposed to the saddest person?
Yesterday, I got a chance to meet with one of my mentors because I'm back home. And we were talking about this idea of having a group of friends who are doing sort of the similar thing. And because you're in this group, it pushes everybody up to higher levels. I know you guys had a group called 2-6, or if it was 2-6 Crew, or I'm not sure what it was, but could you talk a little bit about that for, especially somebody who's listening that maybe feels like they're on their own and maybe they have an opportunity to form a group as well that would really benefit them and make their whole process of being an artist a lot more enjoyable?
I think there were a core group of 6 of us, And some of us were friends before art school. Some of us had met in art school in a few classes, and some of us were just, again, friends from outside of art school. But we just started painting together and developed these little paintings that we decided, because of our kind of graffiti roots, decided to install them outside, and it gave us an activity. We called them prefabs. So we started just manufacturing these little wooden paintings en masse. And it was a fun activity to get together and just, chat and have a few beers and just have some laughs and really not care about what we were doing, because ultimately we were just going to go nail them up somewhere outside. So it didn't really matter. So there was kind of this real, like anything goes for these little works. But we started to, through working together, inspire each other and really push each other. And we were kind of each other's own worst critics, but in the best possible sense, where we could really, I guess, the closer we became in terms of being friends and allies, the more we could really give really solid advice, because sometimes you'd just be with a colleague in class and you'd be like, oh, what do you think of this blue line, for example? And, they might be afraid to tell you what they really think because they don't want to have any problems. It's kind of like, oh, it's good. But we could really kind of dig deep. And, but through this, harsh criticism came real development, because it allows you to push forward. We ended up having a number of exhibitions and got quite a bit of notoriety for what we were doing. And through that, continue still to manufacture and exhibit work, which is fantastic. But I think the benefit of being in a group, Winnipeg, especially at the time, was breeding a lot of collectives, artist collectives. And there was a lot of news about Winnipeg being the artist collective capital, and what is it about Winnipeg that breeds all these art? It could be the winter where people are just like, okay, let's get together and do something.
Yeah,
collectives are born everywhere, and whether or not you hear about them, there's a number of artist collectives throughout the world in every city. It's just maybe the media found a story that they could elaborate on, and it became that. But I think the benefit of being in the group is support and honesty and the drive to push each other to exceed something, to not be afraid to try new things. When you're alone in the studio, it's kind of like, should I do that? I don't know. It's kind of out of my comfort zone, blah, blah, blah. But if you're with friends who respect you, support you, and admire what you do, whether or not they say it in their feedback, you can kind of really push the boundaries and leave that comfort zone that you're used to. Yeah, it was really good. It was very beneficial. I would recommend it to anyone.
Let's talk a little bit about the transition from moving from Canada to moving to Berlin, where you're currently at, and what that transition has been like for you as an artist. Is it the same, but now you're just doing things in German? Is it completely different? And what would you say to somebody who's considering moving abroad, but maybe the people around them aren't supportive of that, and they think, well, why do you need to go somewhere else to do what you're going to do anyway? Why don't you just stay home and do that thing?
For myself, I had been considering making a move for a number of years, and my good friend Adrian Williams, who also used to live in Winnipeg, is also a visual artist, was a member of the Royal Art Lodge. Speaking of collectives, constantly for almost 2 straight years saying Berlin, 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 Berlin. And I didn't know it at the time, but Berlin as a city was kind of reaching past its peak of this explosion of, being the next big city. Although it's still, I don't mean past its peak, but there was a point in time that I discovered after being here where it was even more crazy than it is now. That said, still contemplating moving, and finally I was like, okay, let's do it. I'll move to Berlin. Why the heck not? It's an international city for art. It's still very cheap to live, although that's changing as the years go on. quite comparable to Winnipeg in that respect. Cost of living is very low. Rent is low. Everything's at your fingertips. You're in the middle of Europe. You're in the capital city of Germany, which happens to be, like, right now the economic superpower of the EU. So that doesn't hurt. And you're basically on the pulse of the art world in Europe and throughout the entire world. Like, you're in one of the major art cities. After moving here, I realized the difficulty, because I didn't learn German ahead of time. I guess I just ran out of time in terms of when I decided to move and all the things I had to take care of. So when I got here, I was just scrambling. The language thing was more than I actually could comprehend. But people here are really gracious, and a lot of them speak English. But in terms of the art world, like, I moved to a city where thousands of people are flocking here monthly. And that's no exaggeration. It's really insane. Out of the population here, which is 3.5 million, I think over 60,000 of them are artists or more, which is it's a huge number. I know. So, not thinking about it, I went from a place where, I was living and working comfortably as an artist, to where, I guess, ego aside, just a matter of fact, like, I have notoriety, to a place where I'm completely anonymous. The competition is way higher because everyone's scrambling to get work in any kind of gallery, or to show their work in any gallery. So that was kind of a big eye opener. Granted, though, I have kind of made some good connections here, and I've had a few shows, group shows, and I had a solo show here 2 years ago, like a year after I moved here. I'm on the writing staff for this Berlin-based art website called B-Pigs. So I do a lot of art reviews and artist interviews. It's been a good sort of, I guess, like a key into the art world here, because it's a hard safe to crack. Because of the amount of competition, it's really hard to kind of, like, how do you stand out amongst the 60,000 other artists that are, maybe 100 of them are doing the same type of work as you? Like, how do you make your name kind of shine more than Joe Schmo there, who's doing the same painting as you? It's really interesting. Like, sociologically, it's really interesting. I had a good friend of mine who's like, you just have to make a name for yourself. You just have to make a name for yourself. And it's funny, like, there's some things that are taboo here. One thing that's not really looked highly upon is actually canvassing galleries. Like, if you go into a random gallery and give them your portfolio, they'll throw it in the garbage. They won't look at it. If you're just new here, like, how do you know who is a curator? If you go to an art opening, there's like 100 people here. Like, who is a curator that I can convince to come see my work? Like, you just feel completely stranded almost. Like, how do these people see my work, and how do they get, unless you're already quite well known. So my friend had a pretty good idea by just like, go make a name for yourself. Just put your name everywhere, and then everyone will know your name at least.
You can do stunts, and I think stunts are kind of fun. I'm sure there's extreme measures that you could take, and I don't know. I think, like, you could look at what rock bands have done to sort of, like, I don't think you should bite the head off a bat, but that would probably, like what? Let's wrap things up. So what is the best place to get a hold of you if somebody wanted to reach out and hears this and wants you to do a solo show, or wants you to, I don't know, there might be people that want help, getting their first show. What's the best way to get in touch?
My under construction website, which is cyrussmith.com.
Cool. So cyrussmith.com, and we will have show notes from this episode at pencilkings.com/Cyrus-Smith, CYRUS-SMITH. And thank you so much, Cyrus, for sharing your story. And we'll be back next week with another episode of the Pencil Kings podcast.
Thanks, Mitch.
If you enjoyed this episode, I'd love it if you could hit the 5-star review on iTunes or Stitcher Radio and leave us a little comment about what you thought about this.